if you want.
All right, so I'll close the door. I don't think it's going to lock it. So I'm very excited. We have our final special guest of the semester. Yes, so I'm going to read our special guest's bio, but first I wanted to actually introduce the class to our special guest. So if we could kind of go around, say your name, pronouns, any other information you want to share just about what you're interested in, studying, working on, performing as, and then we'll loop back around to you. So.
Cool, yeah. Hi, I'm Ari. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a junior studying sociology and policy here at Brown. This is my first music class, or class in music department, so I'm really excited to be here and I've really enjoyed the semester. And curious to know a bit about your work.
Nice to meet you, Lauren.
You too.
I'm Priya. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior and I'm studying gender sexuality studies. So this class is in line with a lot of like the theoretical concepts I've been learning, but it's only my second music class, so I'm still learning a lot more about like the sonic aspect of it. Yeah, I'm super excited. Me too.
I'm a sophomore. I think I'm studying sociology. I'm sure.
I didn't hear your name.
Kenny Ayala.
Kenny Iola.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. You have a beautiful accent.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Zoe. I'm a senior. She, her pronouns. I'm studying music and Africana studies. So this is one of the many music courses I've taken, and I really, really love it. The music department here is great. And I'm also a bassist as well.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Andrew. I'm a senior studying music, and that's it. And yeah, really happy to be here. I just make EDM.
Hi, I'm Becca. I'm a senior. I study music and neuroscience, and I've been playing cello since I was like 7. So yeah.
I'm Corinne. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a senior studying linguistics, and then I'm like a hobbyist musician. This is my first like music class that I've seen though. I play like 13 instruments or something.
Hi, I'm Maeve. Use she, her pronouns. And I'm not sure what I'm studying. I'm a third year. And just happy to be here. So, yeah, thanks for being here.
I'm Bonnie. I'm in the PhD grad composition program. Yes, PhD grad composition program. And she, her pronouns, and yeah, I'm excited to meet you actually. I work a lot with the Wedding Cake House folks, and I know you're in residence there, so maybe you can share about that too.
Absolutely.
But were we like stalking together, or
When we were
early on? Yeah, we had
organizing a program.
And we were like looking at different artists locally, and then I think you and I had been like, ooh, like, and we're like, oh, she's out on tour, she's doing this, she's doing that. So yeah, so I've been aware of your work for a while, so excited to meet you.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to meet you all. My name is Aura. I'm a musician, but I've been independent since I began, so I also make my videos and I do my graphic design and I edit, and just everything it takes to make this music stuff work, so kind of a whole team within myself. But yeah, did I say my name right?
I believe so. You can always say it again.
It was nice, yeah. Say it again.
It's Aura. I feel like, it's a new kind of name, so a lot of people sometimes have difficulty pronouncing it, so I'm okay with, like, if anyone's wondering how to pronounce it, I have no problem with you asking.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. I've shared Aura's bio up here. You can read it, as well as her wonderfully put together EPK, electronic press kit, with all of these dope images. And I didn't realize you do collage work as well, which is something we've just started incorporating into this class. So we can talk a little bit about that as well. But yeah, we just wanted to, I thought it was important for us to have a conversation with someone who's actively working within Providence, who's from the space, and can share with us what we should know and how we can be a part of the scenes and communities that are most important here, so that we're not just extracting from the place, but pouring into it as well. So we'll start off, and if you have questions, please raise your hand, and we'll veer over to that direction. But I wondered if first you could tell us about your folks and where you are from.
Yeah. So I'm born and raised here in Providence. My mom, Tammy, she's right over there. And then also my father, his name is Miguel, but he passed away a few years ago. But they're both first-generation immigrants coming here from Dominican Republic. And they settled down here, and I lived here for a good chunk of my life. For the last few years, especially since doing music 6 years ago, I've been able to travel to New York and Boston and Florida and just all these other places to play, but also explore. Like, I lived in Puerto Rico for a few months to strengthen my written and spoken Spanish so that I could make music in Spanish and feel, confident in doing so. So yeah, I'm a Sag, so I just big adventurer.
Yeah. So thank you for giving that some context for your work, and I'm curious about your relationship to the Dominican Republic. I have parents. My mom is from the Ivory Coast. My dad is from the Congo. So I have an interesting relationship with home, what home is, because it sort of extends diasporically. So I wondered if you could chat a little bit about, have you been to the Dominican Republic? Is that where cousins or other family members are? Is that a space you want to go to explore further?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually want to move there this winter to further deepen my roots within the Dominican Republic. My father, he used to bring us every summer to go with him for a few weeks. I went every year up until I was 13. Because he had gotten sick and couldn't really travel anymore, but I wouldn't say that I was really able to explore because it's always had this dangerous stigma, and my dad wouldn't let us leave the villa we stayed at unless it was with him. But he had a lot of business there. He had bought a lot of property. He was an entrepreneur my whole life, so a good chunk of all his business dealings were over there. So when we would go visit, it was kind of for him to catch up with all the things he needed to catch up with, and we'd go to the beach and go out to eat. But apart from that, I can't say I was really able to explore until I went in 2021, and we stayed in Zona Colonal, which is kind of like the tourist area there, I guess. It was during, the quarantine period, so it was very quiet, and it was nice to see, just take it in without. I mean, of course, I would have loved to see what the people are up to in there every day. But it was nice to just see the architecture and walk through the streets and just kind of take in the silence, because I think we are a party people primarily. So just to kind of see it in a stillness was beautiful.
Yeah. So bringing things back to Providence.
Sure.
What's your relationship to Providence's music and art scenes and communities? What have you enjoyed about being part of the music community in Providence? What would you critique about the music community and scene here? How did you get into the space as an artist? And then I have some questions about you becoming an artist as well.
Sure. Well, I got into the space once I kind of started putting my music out there. There was this band that was really dope. They were called Lovesick. And I had some friends in it, and I kind of told them, I'm doing music now. And they introduced me to this other band that was pretty popular locally called Downtown Boys. And they had just played Coachella, they were doing their thing. But they kind of took me in and introduced me to all their friends, and I started getting shows from there. And it was nice. It was, it was the DIY scene, but I think what caught up with me later on was that it was primarily a white scene, and I was the token artist who they had on all their bills. But I am grateful for just that entrance into the music scene via the grunge scene and whatnot, because I was able to learn how to do all my things on my own. I started making my own merch, I started booking my own shows, and that was thanks to all the people who gave me opportunities to play.
Could you, when you say DIY scene, could you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that? We've had some conversations about scenes and communities and some of the tensions that emerge around being an artist who is often marginal or maybe sort of coming from a place on the margins. So yeah, could you talk about what that DIY space is? Because I think that's actually how you and I met. Was
Yeah,
through,
New York.
at a sort of in a kind of DIY space.
Yeah, it was.
And having these networks or kind of underground communities that we're corresponding through. So yeah, could you talk about what DIY means, what DIY has meant to you?
Yeah, so DIY is the idea of doing it yourself. I think it also stems into the idea of being an independent artist, although not all DIY artists are independent, you know. But for the scene I was coming up in, it was like you're making your own merch, so that's screen printing on your stuff. You're making your own bills, you're reaching out to the venues and you're asking your friends, hey, do you want to come play? And you guys are making like a scrappy flyers, you know, sometimes it's like a drawing or something made on like paint, but it's all just basically using your own mind and deepening your creativity to lend to that scene. And that scene stretched in so many different directions. It wasn't just in Providence, you know, I was able to do tours, DIY tours with other artists where we would go to like Pittsburgh, like I played at a farm once. And yeah, you would just go all these different places and you would see the DIY scenes there, and they were all very much the same. And it was really dope. It was really dope. I enjoyed it. But yeah, your professor and I, we met at Silent Barn, which was a venue in New York City. And I remember they were like an artist residency as well, or they would house artists. So there was also an apartment within Silent Barn that threw shows like in their kitchen called 603. So they were
I played that kitchen too, actually.
Did you play that kitchen?
I mean, the like ludicrousness of having the venue be that kitchen,
Yeah.
and then everybody being like, I played that kitchen.
It's good times. Yeah, it's good times.
Yeah.
I think like the DIY scene also introduced me to the idea of community. Because when I first started making music, I feel like the reason why I went to my friends who were in the band Lovesick was because I wasn't accepted in the hip hop community. When I first started, I produced all my own music, and it was really weird. Like I wanted to make hip hop, I wanted my music to be understood, but it's always been like very ahead of its time and like different. So in Providence, there wasn't a lot of space for that alternative. The alternative automatically went into the grudge scene, which was a primarily white scene, and the hip hop scene was over here. And I think it's grown a lot since then. But there's still that division.
Yeah, I appreciate you talking us through. We've read various texts and had conversations about spaces or movements that are sort of designed to be inclusive or have kind of, liberal ethics that are assigned to the space, but then in practice don't actually bear out that kind of the like dream for what the space can be, right? Like there still is a way in which it can be very segregated, or still is a way in which it can be difficult for artists who don't have the requisite technical knowledge to actually enter into the space and feel safe and feel seen and feel like they're supported. So can you talk a little bit about, you said you've made this shift.
Yeah.
You came in through this kind of punk, I'm thinking of Downtown Boys, like punk, almost like hardcore space.
Yeah.
And then are veering into spaces you feel like that are more reflective of the people of color within Providence. So can you talk a little bit about making that move and how you made the decision that this was a space that you wanted to kind of cultivate for yourself or move towards?
Yeah. Well, I think when 2020 came around and the riots began, I finally had the language to understand what I was feeling and experiencing. So, I would always play to crowds where people didn't look anything like me. And I realized, I don't want to continue growing into this, and I want to try to figure out another way to do it. So I ended up basically rebuilding my network, and it's something that I'm still doing now. I had so many opportunities in those spaces, but I just didn't want them anymore because I didn't feel comfortable. It felt weird to sing my songs and share my experiences with people who would never get it. And that's not to exclude anyone, it's just to kind of set a new foundation for myself. So, you know, it's really been quite the hustle. I think I've, you know, been having to learn how to network, and, you know, I'll show up to certain events, I'll talk to the DJs, I'll talk to the owner of the venue, and just kind of navigating how to make that happen on my own now. How to receive the resources I need on my own.
Yeah. So I want to get another layer deeper into the question of how you first started making music in the first place.
Yeah.
So like who some of your inspirations were
Yeah.
that empowered you to make, you know, kind of weird stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like I have a similar origin story in terms of I was making beats for a video game that didn't exist, and I would show it to my friends, and they were like, "This is weird. This is really weird. Why are you doing this?" You know? And so, like, creating a space for yourself in the absence of kind of like feedback or a community, or like, I'm very curious about where the seed came from for you. That like, I want to speak, and I want to speak in this way. I want to make my music, I want to make my beats, I want to produce music that sounds this way. Like what kind of fueled that for you?
I mean, it's so multi-layered. Like when I started producing, and I never said I wanted to make things that sounded a certain way, but I couldn't because I was self-taught. I never bothered to like look at any manuals of any DAW I ever used in my life. Like I just started playing around with it, and I like allowing the ideas to formulate and build in my brain, and that's the music that came out. But I feel like my relationship with music is so deep. Like, you know, I grew up with my dad and my mom always playing, like, my dad always playing hip hop, but also playing like Rock 105, which is like Madonna and Sade and like all that 80s music, you know, like take these broken wings and all that kind of stuff. And I loved it. Like I was like, oh, this is great music. And also being Dominican, you know, growing up with like reggaeton and bachata and merengue, all the family parties. So it was already such an array of things. When I got into high school, I had a friend who put me on to metal. I loved metal so much. I loved EDM so much. I used to just like sit when I got home from school and watch the Music Choice EDM channel and just discover new EDM artists. So yeah, and then I started playing San Andreas DTA, and that put me on to a lot of like throwback hip hop, like not just Biggie and Tupac, but like Big Daddy Kane and Slick Rick and, you know, Gangstar, and just from there I feel like hip hop is a study in itself. There's so much music to discover and so many different links with samples and all that. But I had some friends in high school, and this was around the Odd Future era, and they started like a collective, and they were making music and they were doing videos, and I was so inspired by that. So I asked my dad to buy me a laptop to produce on for Christmas, and he did. And that's where the music started. For a while I was just a producer, and then 2 years into that I started writing and then releasing my first songs. And I think when I decided, I actually want to write to my beats, that was around the time that this collective called Awful Records came out. So like Abra, Tommy Genesis, they were really strange, but they were amazing to me. So those were all the artists I mentioned put a battery in my back, but I think especially seeing those women rise, I was like, wow. And yeah, from there, just grew.
Yeah, so when you were first like, okay, I want a laptop, I want to make the music that's in my head, I want to have it exist in the world, what programs were you using, and how did you even dive into the process of, as someone who was not classically trained in any way, I also very intimately connect with this idea of just like, okay, I'm just going to play in here and see what happens. So yeah, if you could talk a little bit about just the exploration phase where you're trying to figure out like what things do with the technology in front of you, playing with the parameters, seeing what sounds you can make. Just give us a little bit of a picture or a kind of soundtrack of that moment.
Yeah. So I got a Windows computer for Christmas, and in the Microsoft App Store, I just typed in music production, and the first thing that came up was this thing called Music Maker for Windows 8, and that was my gold. And I used that for years until that laptop gave out. I feel like I dabbled a little bit in Ableton and Fruity Loops, but really Music Maker was like my jam. So once I didn't have access to that anymore, I just kind of stopped fully producing my own things. I think, and I was really lucky because by that point, I had people who were interested in my music and producers would send me stuff. And from there, I would just add my ideas onto what they sent me. But yeah, I don't know, it was weird. When I was producing, it would just be like, I hear this. And you know what, actually when I first started using Music Maker, I would listen through all the sounds. If a sound stuck out to me, I'd pull it out. And then if another sound that I was going through sounded good with that sound I'd pull that out, and I would just build that way.
And during that time, were you sharing music with other folks? Like, what was your relationship with with other people's ears or other people's aesthetics? For you, was it sort of like, this is for me, this is a process that I'm working through, and this is a universe I'm building for myself? Or were you in conversation with other folks? Were you showing it to people around you? Were you showing it to your mom? Were you showing it to your neighbors? Like, what was it, how were you kind of developing as an artist in that space?
I would just put my beats on SoundCloud. I remember my mom moved to Florida for a little bit, Hollywood, Florida, and I went to live with her, and we had like a small studio apartment that we shared, and I really got into my production back there. And it's interesting because my journey as well as an artist is not, like, even though I've always felt it within me, I never claimed it until I was like 20. I was always labeled like very weird growing up, and I feel like the stigma of being an artist just is like further creates the identity of like being strange, so I didn't want that. So I think I created like in private for a while, and I didn't really put it in people's faces until I had that full confidence, and I'm like, I'm great at this, check it out. But yeah, it definitely started on the internet, you know, SoundCloud. I'd tweet out my link on Twitter. A lot of people didn't believe it was me. I think now the idea of women being producers is more normalized, but for a while at shows I had to be like, I produce this, because people would not believe it. Like, they would not believe it, and it was like an amazement to them. Like, women can produce, it's strange.
Yeah, I love this idea of the kind of disseminating through SoundCloud and like putting out your kind of like sonic feelers into the universe as you're developing your artist self. Did you connect with people through SoundCloud or on SoundCloud, or was it more so, again, a space for you to just release your sort of like thoughts into the universe?
Yeah, I feel I did connect with people on SoundCloud. I'm gonna return.
You were saying
SoundCloud.
Yes, if you connected with people on SoundCloud, or it was more so like, this is where my things are gonna live for now.
I mean, I think both. And I remember connecting with people on SoundCloud, but there are so many people who I've lost contact with since then. But there was this one other artist from Canada that I don't remember how we came across each other, but it was definitely, we kept up with each other's music via SoundCloud. And I actually just met her 2 months ago when I went to visit Vancouver. So that was really cool. We've been seeing each other's growth for the last 6 years, and that was the first time we ever met.
That's really special. Yeah. And I think there's something powerful about a lot of these like internet communities and internet kind of spaces where music is cultivated, because for me especially, it's been a space for me to see where folks are doing things that we're often told are not happening. So that's where I was meeting a lot of other women producers, a lot of other women non-binary producers, a lot of other folks who I was told didn't exist, you know, so I think it's really special to think about how SoundCloud has cultivated so many of those spaces for folks to figure out where their musical kin are, you know, halfway across the globe. Like, oh, I'm putting out these signals and someone else is communicating in the same language as me somewhere else, you know, and you start to build relationships in that way. I think it's really special.
Absolutely. And one other thing too that I want to say about like being a part of the punk scene, it definitely opened my eyes to so much, because that's where I first was introduced to like queer, non-binary, trans people. I'd never really had any access to those sort of relationships in my life before. So yeah, it opened my mind in so many different ways.
Yeah, I think being in show spaces with so many different kinds of artists has become really important to me as well. I think I'm not as interested in organizing shows or putting together bills where everyone's sort of performing from the same musical standpoint, and instead it's like organizing a show from the same politic. Like, do we connect over the idea that we should get to be loud and take up space and kick doors in? And if you are down with that and down with that liberation, then all forms of music and all folks should be represented in this space. So I think it's an important part of like punk ethos is, you know, that I think has been co-opted and often reframed when we think about the histories of punk or the histories of rock, that these have often been transgressive spaces that have been popularized only after the queerest and brownest folks are in the space, making it what it is, like making it the noisy and chaotic and revolutionary radical space that it is. So I think
for sure.
It's important for you to highlight that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what was so interesting about it for me is that like you kind of learn like as you spend time in the space. It's not like there's like an introduction, like, oh, this is what we're doing in the space. You're like, oh wait, this is a whole new kind of world here. Like as you spend more time in it.
Yeah, I love that observation too, because there's different ways that we learn, right? Like this is one setting, one format for how we educate ourselves about the world we live in. We do a lot of reading in this class, a lot of listening. That's another modality. But then there's being in community. There's being dropped into the space and learning about relationships and politics in that way, right? Seeing how it actually plays out through who's put on the bill, right? And who's a headliner and who's not. And all of those kinds of dynamics reveal the politics to you, or even this sort of gendered relationship to music production, right? That you weren't necessarily thinking about, but realized was happening when people were surprised that you were the person producing, right? Like the politics make themselves emerge to you when you transgress them, or when you kind of reject a stereotype or an idea that maybe is not verbalized until you present a challenge to that thing, until you show up in the space, and then someone has to confront their own kind of BS about what a producer is supposed to look like or sound like. So I really love that idea that the scene or the community is a space that educates us about the things, the concepts, the theories, the theoretical ideas that we read about and might think about out here, but not recognize are happening all the time on the ground level. So I wanted to know, and please, if you have questions, jump in. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about some of your musical influences, who are not even just musical, but who are some of your influences, period? Who are some of the folks who help you to think about your creative journey, your journey as an entrepreneur and independent artist? Who do you look to? Who's your kind of North Star as you're thinking about, like, okay, this is how I want this to go, or this is who I want this to speak to, or this is who I want for other people to connect my music with when they hear it?
Honestly, when I think about inspirations, I just think about all the rule breakers we've seen all over time. I feel like they have always appealed to me, you know, but at the same time, my musical journey has actually been so much about me. I've discovered so many different parts of myself through what I've written, because the way that I create songs is like, you know, I'll play a beat and whatever comes to mind, that's what I'll go with, because I feel like that's like the good stuff right there. That's like the guidance, you know, the intuitive guidance. And I've been so surprised by like what's come out during those times. And I think I actually continue to probably be my biggest inspiration. Like my past work is what guides me into the future. But I was also always super influenced by the idea that like hip hop pioneers had of your music has to be honest to your experience. Like, don't be faking your raps. And so I've always, you know, just had that honesty in my work.
Yeah. So as part of that, an extension of that question, can you tell us about your songwriting process?
Yeah.
So for some of the different tracks that I sent out, everything you sent to me, I sent out to the students to listen to. So for some of those songs, for example, can you talk us through how you figure out what a song is going to be about, and the process of actually creating that song, and then knowing when it's finished, knowing when it's ready to exist in the world.
Well, yeah, like I said, I'll have a beat in front of me and I'll just go with whatever comes out right away. Sometimes I'll freestyle the whole thing and it'll be a 5-minute situation. Like one of my most popular songs, Pushback 5, I wrote that in 5 minutes during a lunch break. But then other times I'll have songs like It's Always Sunny in Vagina, which that took me a few months to write. So it really varies, but I always start out with that freestyle aspect, and whether I finish the entire song or add to it over time, that's how it'll go. And then like as much as I love music and being a creative, I would say the most difficult part is once you have it written, going to record it and like getting the mix done, because I've spent hours on songs, like hundreds of hours on songs, getting each second perfect, or to my standards of that. So yeah, it's really a dedication kind of thing, and just having the patience with yourself to trust that it will get done no matter how long it takes. Did I answer your full question?
Yeah, and in that process, what I'm also curious about is like, are you recording snippets of yourself? Is this all living up here? As someone who has an awful memory, I'm always in awe of people who will create a full song in their brain and then be able to go into the booth or go into the studio and just lay it down. Like how, during the lunch break, for example, when you are like, okay, I'm gonna make this song, are you doing a voice memo? Are you like, how are you documenting parts of the song as it grows, or as you have the ideas that come to you?
Definitely voice memos for the win. Love a good voice memo. Before I start any freestyle, the voice memo has to be there because I will forget it the moment it's done. And you know, sometimes I'll be with friends and I'll be playing the beat in their car and I'll be recording my memo, but then I'll have them record me recording with the beat so that I can hear like kind of that final product, or not the final product, but what the idea could be. Definitely have the recorder out.
Yes, I can echo this 1,000%. And I'm always like, I'm gonna remember this easy. Like, there's no way I can forget. And it's like 10 minutes later, it's gone. Not a trace. So please record your thoughts down.
Absolutely.
So
hold on, one more thing I want to say too. I feel like I've gone through so many processes of recording where it's like I'll have that crisp studio edition, but like in the last 2 years I've become really fond of things I've literally recorded on my iPod with GarageBand. You know, like I think that's really awesome too, and I feel like maybe sometimes people don't count that as music, but I think that's probably the best because it's so raw. But yeah, just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I can attest to this, particularly thinking about technology and what it means to have like a crisp recording, right? So my very first album I recorded on like a USB mic that I bought from the campus store. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I have to record this. I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, and I would record sitting at my desk, rapping into the mic the same way I would like write a paper or something. And I mixed it in the car, in my little, my little car outside my apartment. And the levels of every song are totally different, right? It's like a really, really DIY labor of love. But when I listen to that project, I feel the heart and the warmth in it. That in the next project, when I had access to a better microphone and a more consistent recording, I don't feel as much warmth. I don't hear myself as much in there. So like in my desire to achieve a certain level of professionalism or professional recording, I feel like something was lost. And so I think it's really important to, like you're saying, to think about where you are in the mix or where you are in the music or the music that you record or produce, right? That in your path to produce great art, you don't get lost in the way, and that you have a sense of what's important. So if what's important for you is for it to be raw, like to stick with that and to sit with that and have that be an aesthetic that you continue to return to versus I think the pressures of what the music industry kind of dictate around how you should release music, what a good song or a good recording sounds like trying to resist that. So I appreciate what you're saying about using whatever technologies are there and making something that feels good to you as the primary kind of mode that you relate to your music through, rather than like what sounds the most crisp or most quote unquote professional.
No, definitely. Like, just be resourceful with what you have. I think that's what makes you the most unique, and I think that will help you to stand out.
Yeah. So I wondered if you could talk about both. You spoke a little bit about this, but difficulties or challenges that you face navigating this musical ecology, and whatever that looks like for you, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. And then also some of the highs, some of the joys that you've experienced as an artist, like moments that for you replay or go back to or revisit and think like, wow, I really did that, or this really happened. So yeah, if you could talk about the challenges that stand out to you the most, but then also the moments that feel like the brightest lights.
Challenges. I mean, there have been so many. I think my biggest challenge has been being a creative who cares so much about the art that they forgot about the business. I feel like now I'm trying to catch up with my work in the way where I can get it monetized and seen in the way I know that it deserves. And just knowing how to get what you need from, the connections you have can be so difficult, because so much of it is having to prove yourself, even though you have the work over time that shows what you're capable of. But I would say that so far has been my biggest challenge. What are some other challenges? I think, this sort of goes hand in hand with what I just said, but the fact that you can't just create, you have to market your stuff. I mean, you can just create if it's not something you plan to do, like with your life, if it's not something you're pouring all of your energy into. But there's so much more than just the creativity. And then I think the highs that I have gotten from it are definitely discovering more of myself through creating. Performing is one of my favorites, just being able to connect with a crowd and have them understand you, because I think a lot of artists just feel misunderstood, and that's the place where people can see them and see their value in a world that often tells us we don't have any. And just seeing people support you and, you know, show up to your shows and be proud to share your work, or be proud to share your name with people who they know. I think just all the things that come together at the end to get you where you really want to be are so beautiful, because so much of it is just love.
Yeah, I think it's always a remarkable thing when you really process what happens when someone buys your work or comes to a show. Like they had to do something to get there, right?
Yeah.
They had to like get out of bed, maybe take a shower, you know, purchase a ticket,
Right,
walk out the
money.
door.
Yeah.
Like there's so many movements that have to take place
Absolutely.
before somebody ends up at that venue, at your show, and in the front row or wherever they're at, and like really thinking about that as an act of love. You
Yeah.
know, like if there's anywhere else in the world that this person could be, or when they stream or purchase your music, recognizing that, again, like you said, as an act of love, where they're making a decision, I want to support this person. This speaks to me to the point where I want them to know that I appreciate them in this form, and I'm going to do what I can to have them feel that is a really special thing.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, sometimes shows are on a Monday, on a Wednesday, and people will still come out at 10 p.m. or whatever the case is. I think that's when it especially hits, because I'm like, oh my, I would have been there. You know?
Yeah, that's real. There's nothing like a Monday night show and someone actually comes. It's like, you are amazing.
You're a real one.
So we don't have too much time left, but I wanted to know if you could, and I don't know if there are questions. Yes, let me stop talking for a second.
Okay.
Posing up.
More of a logistical question, but I was wondering about, like, you said that, you know, after you sort of left that initial space that you were in, you had to learn how to, like, book your own shows and network, and I was just kind of wanted to ask about, like, that process, particularly the booking your own shows.
Yeah. So booking the shows was kind of something that I learned, like, while I was still in the punk space. Basically, at that time, you know, if I knew a friend who was having a show, I would just ask, oh, hey, like, who's the booker here? And they would introduce me to the booker. Now that I'm on my own, like, I'll ask the bartender or, like, whoever I know that is working for the venue, oh, hey, like, if I'm going to someone else's show, how did they put this show together? And, you know, you get their email and you reach out. And you can just say something like, hey, I'm so-and-so, I was at your venue recently, I really loved it, and I was just curious, what is the process of throwing a show here? And depending on the venue, sometimes they'll ask you for an upfront fee, sometimes they'll just give it to you for free, sometimes it'll be a percentage split, and you definitely want them to take something on the lower end, like if you're selling tickets, maybe they'll have an online ticket link, or maybe it'll just be at the door. And maybe they'll take 30% and all the performers get 70%. And then as the booker, that is a job in its own. So if you're the one putting it all together, I would also suggest that you take like a 10% apart from your performance fee, just so that you're respecting your own time and effort. Yeah. Thank you. Was there anything else you wanted to know about that?
No, that was basically it.
Someone else had a question.
Oh, no.
Okay. I have two questions actually. One is, can you talk more about, like, you said that you had friends in a band and that was a lot of how you, like, got into the scene, like your first scene, and if you could, like, talk more about that, I feel like as someone who's, like, trying to lean on my music friends and curious about that.
Honestly, I want to say that I got really lucky that they were willing to help me, because a lot of people might not be. You know, I just let them know I'm making music. A friend of mine who's in the band, Lovesick, Josh, he loved my work, and he was like, yeah, these are the friends that I have who are helping us get shows. And then they introduced me to the Downtown Boys that way. But you know, if it's not working out for you to go through the friends you have in music, I would honestly just suggest starting to throw your shows, because the other way for you to make it happen is to carve out that space for yourself. And you can build your own community in that way with the artists who are you're bringing on to play at your shows. But yeah, unfortunately, people won't always be willing to help you.
Yeah, and then my other question is, you've given, like, I feel like your whole talk has been full of, like, tips for people starting out, or if you have any other, like, tips for people starting out?
I would say have a strong visual presentation if you can, whether you're making the graphics or you know another person who makes really sick graphics, because I think that's been a big part of my growth. I think when people talk about my work, they always talk about the visuals, and music is a commodity that people need to give you their time for to digest. Like, you know, painters and stuff, someone can just look at their work really quick, decide if they like it or not. With music, you know, if I have 100 songs and you just listen to one and you don't like that one, it's like, so I think the visual aspect is super important. And yeah, just, I feel like it's so important to be yourself and be honest in your work. Especially because I think now that I'm learning more about like the industry itself, basically it's just a bunch of prototypes of the same person. So what's always gonna have you stick out is being who you are. There's only one of you.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks for those questions. I
Yeah, I have a question. So thank you for sharing everything you shared. I was wondering, in your experience organizing like spaces or shows, like how you establish like intentions for the space or safety standards or even accessibility things. What does your process look like around that, or what have some challenges been or things you've learned around that maybe you didn't know at first?
I think when it comes to safety standards, I've never had to really speak on it because I've always booked people who I trust personally, who have treated me well. And then I think my intention for the shows have always been to have diversity that I didn't see where I was. So whether that's bringing in more women, more queer people, whether that's bringing in music that I see has been overlooked, but I think is great. It's really just been like a range of my personal tastes. But I think that's a perfect way to book a show, you know? Like why, I understand the way to make money is to work with what's most popular, but I think being the kind of artist that I am, it's always been for my personal work about what's most unique and what I like the most, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Just like bouncing off of that, how do you communicate the diversity piece? Like when you're talking about like bringing in more women, more queer folks, or whatever it might be, like how does that like tangibly come into practice? If that makes sense.
I think I've just been lucky to know a range of people, and being that like I'm a minority myself, I feel like I have one of the best examples of what diversity is. You know, so I think it's always including more Black people. It's including, I mean, kind of how I said, including more Black people, including more queer people. You know, if I have a show of 4 artists, maybe one of them will be men. You know, it's, yeah, having different sounds. And maybe it doesn't always have to be music. Maybe we'll have 2 music artists, 1 comedian, and a performance artist. And you can even, you know, have certain vendors, maybe someone selling edibles, maybe someone selling paintings. Like, there's, I think shows really don't have to be so one way. Like, it's really kind of just a vibe. And whatever vibe you want that to be, you know, invite whatever you want in. I've even had, like, someone doing face paintings at a show before. So.
Yeah, I love that point about breaking apart the show structure, right? There's so many different configurations for how you can create a space for people to show up and enjoy and share art. And often we can fall into these sort of like ready-made assemblages where it's like artists at the front on the stage, the audience down here, and there's 3 acts, and there's this amount of, you know, like there's a really well understood structure for what a show space is supposed to be, but like we don't have to subscribe to any of that. You know, we don't have to subscribe to any part of that.
There's no rules.
Yeah,
literally with anything, not even the work itself.
Yeah, like really recognizing that. And I also love what you said about kind of the like boots on the ground work of building up a community and figuring out how to do your shows. Like I was really surprised to learn how much time is spent as a working artist just emailing people.
Right.
Like, I was like, man, y'all should see the spreadsheets, the like Google Doc, like that is the work of being an artist. It's
Yeah.
like being hella organized with Google Docs and Excel sheets and like all of that sort of administrative work is a lot of what it means to be a working artist. Like going and sending out email after email after email after email after email to folks about like, oh, this is what I'm doing. I'm interested in being in this space. How can I be in this space? Like, who else is coming through? Like, a lot of that kind of work is so important for making it happen.
Absolutely. And like sometimes emailing is an absolute nightmare. So if there's someone specific who you want to meet, if you have access to like a location they might be at, whether you know they're gonna like be DJing here or hosting here or whatever it is that they do, if you know there's a place they're gonna be in person and you want to reach them, I suggest just going to meet them. And if you don't have their personal information yet, asking for it then. Like once you introduce yourself, oh hey, my name is so-so, I'm interested in doing this, that, and the third, what's the best way to contact you? And I feel like I've had most of my luck doing that, showing up in person.
Yeah. So the last question I have is if you could share with us what you want us to know about Providence.
Yeah.
I think that's really important to hear from you.
Absolutely. I think Providence's like native scene, we are so talented, we are so unique, but we do not have an industry here. And so it is very difficult to get out of here and really do something, especially if you're a creative. So I think personally what I wish was that like, you know, the resources that are here at Brown, the resources that are at RISD, I wish those would be shared with like the inner community because you guys have so much that we don't have. You know, you guys have funding that we don't have. They don't really, it's weird because the colleges and like the actual Providence community are so separated. They're two different worlds. So, you know, whether that's like organizing a Facebook group or even like I'd be down to help make something happen where like I can connect you with artists that need things here that you can maybe help with. Because yeah, we are making it happen from scratch and it's difficult. It's difficult.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming and for spending time with us and sharing your work, and we will be circulating and listening to your work. If you have one more question. So thank you. We'll keep everybody posted about any upcoming shows, events, and like I said, this is the start of a conversation. And yeah, we'll have a 5-minute